Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for coming by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. This might get your attention. Ramen, which is a Japanese food, is now more popular than Bitcoin. That's something to consider for all of us who like to analyze this avocado millennial crypto trading new economy stroke demographic. The Nasdaq technology-heavy stock index has rebounded from last month's correction to reach a fresh record high, unlike the broader S&P 500 index. That's according to Bloomberg, and this caught my attention. With the likes of Facebook and Netflix valued at over 10 times sales, we are reminded of the quote from Sun Microsystems co-founder Scott McNealy in the aftermath of the tech crash, wrote SocGen strategists. McNealy memorably asked of investors buying his company's stock at 10 times revenue, "What were you thinking?" According to Vala Afshar, these are the 17 equations that changed the world. And that took me to Rumi. We come spinning out of nothingness, scattering stars like dust. Rumi is one of the world's most read poets. During his life and since his death in 1273, pilgrims have come to Konya. Today, Rumi's tomb is Turkey's second most visited tourist attraction, after the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. He was a mystic, a Sufi saint who loved all religions and whose own religion was love. His followers would, and still do, lose themselves in trance and dance, sometimes spinning like tops for hours on end. I'm a big fan. Almost every year since 1983, this is the writer in The Guardian, I've been coming with 2 million or so tourists who visit Konya annually. We visited many years ago and we went to the mausoleum and then went to see a Sufi dervish dance in the basement of his mausoleum. And we came out absolutely intoxicated. But staying with those 17 equations, just 6 numbers, the deep forces that shape the universe by Martin Rees. Some of those 6 numbers should already be familiar to anyone who reads about cosmology. One can gasp at the implications of the density parameter omega, which 1 second after the Big Bang could not have varied from unity by more than 1 part in a million billion, or the universe would not still be expanding 13.7 billion years on. Who'd have thought that we also need a D for dimension to equal 3, because without that value the show would never have got on the road. Under the inverse square law, however, a planet that speeds up ever so slightly or slows down simply shifts to a very slightly different orbit. That is why we owe the stability of the solar system to the fact that space-time has, on the macro scale, only 3 physical dimensions. Take, for instance, Q, the 1 part in 100,000 ratio between the rest mass energy of matter and the force of gravity. Were this ratio a lot smaller, gas would never condense into galaxies. Were it only a bit smaller, star formation would be slow and the raw material for future planets would not survive to form planetary systems. The measure of nuclear efficiency, E for epsilon, has a value of 0.007. If it had a value of 0.006, there would be no other elements. Einstein's supposed biggest blunder, the cosmological constant, A for lambda, is a number not only smaller than first expected, it is a number so small that the puzzle is that it is not 0. But this weakest and most mysterious of forces, think of a value with 120 zeros after the decimal point, seems to dictate the whole future of the universe. Reese says, look at it another way. Suppose instead that you were the intended victim of a firing squad and every bullet missed you. Wouldn't you be inclined to wonder if something special had been arranged on your behalf, and that somewhere in the looking-glass world of modern physics there might be some deeper reason for the providential value of these 6 numbers, as if they were, would we be smart enough to see it? Stephen Hawking passed away, and that's a very sad thing. He was an extraordinary scientist and said many things. I like this quote from Fatuma Abdullahi. Those who live in the shadow of death are often those who live most, she said of him. He said, my goal is simple. It is a complete understanding of the universe, why it is as it is, and why it exists at all. Google has developed a way to predict your risk of a heart attack just by scanning your eye. I like this photograph, sunset over the River Congo from Brazzaville, with Kinshasa so close yet so far. That's from the Solo Wanderer. My grandchildren will have children who well may find there is no Boston, Miami, Mombasa, Sydney, or the thousands of other seaside cities. So says Richard Leakey. On that note, let me post a photograph of Fort Jesus and the Mombasa Club in Mombasa. I've been looking at some old footage of the Gorongosa National Park. Have a look at this short footage from the 1960s, all about this deserted house which became the Lion House. It is some interesting footage. Political reflections, plenty going on. Russia says US plans to strike Damascus and pledges a military response. Russia said on Tuesday it had information that the United States planned to bomb the government quarter in Damascus on an invented pretext, and said it would respond militarily if it felt Russian lives were threatened by such an attack. In the event of a threat to the lives of our servicemen, Russia's armed forces will take retaliatory measures against the missiles and launchers used. This is Gerasimov in a statement. This is a significant escalation in the language, but I conclude by saying it is entirely fortunate that the two principals surely are incredibly reluctant to clash, or at least Trump appears so. Pentagon General Joe Dunford spoke with his Russian counterpart yesterday, hours after the Russian general threatened retaliation against the US if it takes any more military action against the Assad regime in Syria. So we've got that situation heating up. In the UK, this is a photograph of emergency services wearing protective clothing work near the bench where the Russian intelligence officer Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found poisoned. Britain and Russia bracing for a showdown as deadline expires for nerve attack explanation. The US, EU and NATO supported Britain after Theresa May said it was very highly likely that Russia was behind the poisoning of Skripal and his daughter with Novichok, a nerve agent developed by the Soviet military. Russia denied any involvement. Moscow will not respond to London's ultimatum until it receives samples of the chemical substance, Russia's embassy. Any threat to take punitive measures against Russia will meet a response. And then a much more aggressive response from Zakharova. What is this talk? They're giving us some hours to explain something. That's not a way to talk to a nuclear superpower. Theresa May apparently is planning an economic war with Vladimir Putin and his allies. I'm not sure that's a bright idea. I take you back to December 2016. In my article, we have a deviate tomahawk referring to Vladimir Putin. The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in. A voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. We have a deviate tomahawk. We copy, there's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We're clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise, your negative red on the step function quad. It was a voice, I told him. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter, and song, with the quality of purest to sweetest sadness. Somehow, we were picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. So definitely, I think the Russians, obviously, I mean, Putin has got form in this matter. He sees it as a sort of, he sees Secret Service people as having a special responsibility to the country in which they were performing those services. His father died, his boss ignored him, then he got fired inside Rex Tillerson's truly awful week. Name the Secretary of State fired in a tweet will be a good trivia question someday. Well, we know now why he cut his Africa trip short. Trump ousted Tillerson, will replace him as Secretary of State with CIA Chief Mike Pompeo. The Deputy Director of the CIA will succeed him at the CIA. I think he was fired by Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, of course, I call the broker of our times, the Adnan Khashoggi at the court of King Donald, the Trumpster. Tillerson, of course, made some fairly forthright comments about Russia. This is a really egregious act, Tillerson said, adding, it certainly will trigger a response, I'll leave it at that. Arca Defense Index jumps near record after President Trump has fired Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Stormy Daniels' lawyer says time to buckle up after Trump missed deadline on offer to return the settlement. The Mexican media and Border Patrol are seen watching Trump tour the U.S. border wall prototypes in this photograph from David F. Myers. International markets, short-term U.S. corporate borrowing costs are rising as firms repatriate cash. That's from Jamie at Reuters. Core consumer prices in February, the 3-month annualized change was plus 3.1%, 6 months plus 2.5%, year-on-year plus 1.9%, and was seen as benign. Currency markets, euro-dollar crossed 124 earlier this morning at 123.97, dollar index softer at 89.61, Japanese yen 106.51, Swiss franc 0.9429, the pound got all the way up to 140, 139.71. Australian dollar 0.7876, Indian rupee 65, the figure. South Korean won, which has been the best performing Asian currency in the last 4 weeks, 1065.02. Brazilian real 326, Egyptian pound 17.62, and the rand 1178.28. Buy that around 12 level. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. I think you buy it, but your stop is at 88. Euro dollar, this is a chart from Wall Street Journal, 123.98 last, 125.60 is heavy resistance. We've been up there, I think, 3 times. Gold, let's take a look at where that might be. Gold is at 1326.75. It was touching 1330 earlier this morning. It had a little bit of a rebound. Crude oil, $60.73 last. Key support level is $60. We've been down there at least twice to test it this year. Rebounded strongly. This third time we might not be so lucky. And if we break below that, we go very quickly to 55. That changes a lot of things, I venture. This commodity investor is hoarding the world's cobalt supply. Very clever trade. Cheap chicken. This is from Queen of Charts. Apparently the price of white meat, chicken breasts, is the lowest it's been in 10 years. Let's move on to Sub-Saharan Africa. Look at this. Interest rate spreads have a positive correlation to G8 central bank assets, i.e. printed money or QE liquidity. That's from Craig Chirinda. What caught my attention, he says, was how the correlation rose post-2014 as more money was pumped into the global economies. So that's interesting. This is a tweet from JD Mahama, who of course was a wonderful guest at Mindspeak. I have witnessed Gambians offload President Yahya Jammeh, Mugabe eased out of power, Uhuru and Kagame were retained in office, Zuma was compelled to resign, famous footballer Opon Weah has become president of Liberia. Ethiopians flee to Kenya after the army mistakenly killed 9 over the border. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has fired his finance minister, Stephen Dew Dow, and named Salvatore Garang Mabior Dit as his replacement, the statement from Kiir's office said. South Africa sees a receptive market for $3 billion worth of Eurobonds. You can say that again. South African all shares down 0.71% year to date. Dollar versus rand, 11.7842. Buy it near 12, looking for a break below 11. Nigerian all share up 12.63% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange up 25.12% year to date. Namibia reported its first listeriosis case, health minister says. The patient allegedly ate a hot dog-style sausage bought from a butchery in Sumeb, 430 kilometers from Windhoek. Obviously, that's going to be South Africa. My piece over the weekend was called The Rapprochement, of course. The key mover behind the rapprochement was Secretary Tillerson and Bob Godek, I'm sure. And ironically, the Secretary was terminated very soon thereafter. But it should not take away. Someone asked me, well, what does it mean to that rapprochement? I said, well, it's a done deal. They're triangulated, which is a positive thing, which is what I was saying that article. If you look at Kenya Inc.'s history over the last 25 years, it's been the politics that has weighed on our economy. You see that in this chart. Kenol Cobil reported full year earnings. Let me talk you through those. Full year net sales popped 53.35% higher to 158.71 billion. Gross profit was up 7.151% at 7.9 billion. Other income was up 25.455%. I don't know whether that's the forecourt, I'm not sure. Administrative and operating costs rose 24.236%, but we'll come to the explanation. Full year impairment provision for KPRL yield shift receivable. They've provisioned another 570.212 million for that. EBITDA was up 0.593% after what we will learn were very big provisions. Profit before tax was up 4%. Profit for the year was up 2.1%. EPS was up 1.829%. They are paying another 30 cents a share dividend, making it a total dividend payout of 60 cents a share, which is up 33.33% from the previous full year. Cash and cash equivalents was down 36%. In the accompanying commentary, they said the improved performance was affected by a settlement of old matters and disputes that included KPRL receivables impairment, former CEO ESOP settlement, and other legal settlements with business partners. We expect no further provisions or expenses related to these matters. Group realized a 2% growth in profit after tax. Without extraordinary expenses, net profit would have been 3.4 billion. Group revenue up 53%, mainly driven by volume growth. Group volume was up 42%. Net financing cost was down 44%. Admin and operating costs grew by 24%, occasioned by extraordinary items as mentioned above. Net of extraordinary items, admin and operating costs would have been lower by 8%. Group carries no long-term debt. So I think they threw the kitchen sink into these full year results, that these results were in fact quite outstanding. And looking at the volume chart over the last few months, and considering the kitchen sink element of these results, I would say we have a change of ownership just over the horizon, which means the price, in my opinion, should be going higher. Kenya shilling last trading at 101.298. Nairobi all share is at a record high. It's up 6.74% year to date. Banking stocks shrug off rate cap. The banks, I said, have strengthened markedly after the IMF specifically called on the government to repeal the Rate Cap Act. The rate cap has staunched private sector credit growth, and investors are calculating a repeal will encourage banks to lend again and increase their profitability. KCB closed at a 31-month high of 50 shillings a share. It's up 16.959% year to date. Equity Bank up 22.641% year to date. Similarly, 31-month high. Barclays Kenya up 19.27% year to date. Co-op Bank up 19.0625% year to date. NSE 20 is up 0.89% so far this year. Thank you kindly for stopping by. It's thoroughly appreciated.